What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So when it comes to understanding the differences between an average player and some of the more higher ranked players, a lot of people do assume that it's kind of just a case of the higher rated players having a lot better mechanics. And it's true that, the more experienced players typically do have better mechanics, but it's also much more accurate to say that they do have a better understanding of the game as a whole and know kind of just all the little hidden tricks here and there that maybe some of the more casual or newer players wouldn't really think about. And so today, we did our best to compile some of our favorite tricks that you can use in the jungle that are probably going to be, I guess, maybe a little bit of common knowledge for the really high ranked, the top tier players, but for everyone else and hopefully you as well, they could potentially really help you level up your game and just improving at jungling in general. And it's kind of just some really cool tips and tricks here and there that I found were interesting and overall enjoyed using. And as well, I wanted to give a huge shout out to ProGuides.com for helping out with the editing on this video. They're a really great place to go to for those of you guys trying to improve your game, but you guys don't have to take it from me. They've got a free trial so you can check it out and really just decide for yourself if you like it or not. So our first trick today is a neat little kiting trick that you can use in a bunch of different ways, and the key here to understand is that Hunter's Talisman, as well as any upgraded items that build out of it, all share the unique passive called Tooth, which applies a health drain to monsters for 5 seconds, dealing 25 magic damage for the duration and healing you for the same amount, or 30 actually once you finish the full jungle item. And this is a very abusable mechanic because you can hit a monster once and then kite back away from the camp to actually get a pretty nice little heal, especially if you used a ranged attack or something like that, so that the monster doesn't have any chance of hitting you and nullifying the benefits of the heal. And this is something that you should definitely be able to use to get the upper hand in any jungle duel when trying to escape from an enemy invade, or maybe if you just want some quick sustain on the way right before you gank a lane. Now 5 health per second doesn't necessarily sound like a massive difference, but it can definitely be enough, more than enough, to win a trade really, especially in the early levels of the game. If you've ever fought someone who maybe popped a health potion mid-fight, it's something like that almost, and this trick can save your life more often than you might expect, and it definitely gives you a nice amount of health in the jungle, especially in the early game as well. In fact, combined with the healing effect of a health potion, the tick gets you 15 health every second for the first 5 seconds, which does actually heal for quite a lot and can be used to gain a lot of health for free pretty much. Now the next trick is perfect for those of you that like to gank a lot or maybe counter jungle, and it's really just all about the sweeping lens. So it's no secret that sweeping lens is a great pickup on junglers. After all, you're constantly moving around the map. It gives you a great opportunity to deny the enemy team some vision. Now something that some of you guys might not think about though is using the sweeping lens as a way to sneak around the map. Now the mechanic here to understand is that sweeping lens actually disables wards, meaning that the enemy team won't get the benefit of the ward's vision, but that disable effect actually stops once you sit and attack the ward to kill it and clear it away. Now most junglers might use the sweeping lens on a bush where they expect a ward to be, they'll find the ward there, and then maybe you start killing the ward. But what you might not realize is that as soon as you start attacking that ward, it starts giving vision again of you to your opponents. So if your plan from the beginning is to sneak into the enemy jungler or maybe set yourself up for a gank, it can often be the better use just to use the sweeping lens to disable the ward in question and then just completely leave it alone, don't kill it at all, and then you can just ignore it because it's disabled. So from there you can continue through your gank path and your opponents won't see you because you disabled the ward. You can head to where you think the ward's going to be, sweep it from outside of its vision range, and then walk past it without the enemy team ever knowing that you were there because you didn't show up on the minimap, you didn't show up in person at all, anything like that. It's the perfect surprise attack and a really awesome trick that you should definitely be using seriously in every single game if you aren't already as a jungler. If you're just focused on denying the enemy team vision or maybe you don't want to gank, it can still be good to clear the wards with the sweeping lens, but generally this trick is a lot better than actually just stopping to kill the ward, and it's really the primary reason why sweeping lens is so powerful in the jungle role as a whole. Now our next trick for today is all about keeping yourself alive against enemy invades, especially in the early game. So it's definitely something that you should always be thinking about when you're playing a slow farming jungler or someone who's just vulnerable to invades really. Someone that's not really a diver like Vi or Lee Sin. And as a jungler, you should really always be asking yourself, especially in the first 4 levels of the game, if it's likely or possible to get invaded at any given point. And if it is something that you think to yourself, hey, if I get invaded in this situation, I'm really screwed, you kind of have to assume that it's going to happen, because if you're vulnerable to it, that's definitely the most likely scenario where an invade would happen. And the trick here is to avoid dying to invades through clever positioning when you're clearing the jungle camps. Essentially what you can do is you can put yourself in a spot where you can see someone coming, as well as optimizing your escape route. Now, you don't necessarily need to worry about this when you can see the enemy jungler with wards, or if they're maybe ganking a lane at the time or something like that, but whenever they don't show up on your minimap and an invade is possible, you definitely want to be ready for it. And so the trick here is that there are two entrances to your jungle from the river, so whenever you're clearing the top or bottom side of your jungle, you want to position yourself in a way that gives you vision of those actual entrances, you know, the routes that the enemy would take to actually invade you, which means that you really should stand away from walls and corners, since that's going to maximize your vision through the fog of war. And building on that trick a little bit further, you can also use the jungle monsters in your escape by using them to body block skill shots. Now that's really effective against champions, especially like Lee Sin, perhaps Elise as well, because by moving behind the jungle monster on your way out, the jungle monsters effectively act as a shield for skill shots, so they'll block the effects like Resonating Strike, Cocoon, stuff like that. Now it's possible that they could still potentially follow up to chase you down, but you would have saved yourself from being dealt a ton of damage, which could definitely be enough to keep you alive in some scenarios. And skill shots are definitely the most important thing to consider when you're being invaded by a solo enemy jungler, since you can get a lot of bonus value out of your flash if you avoid a skill shot with it. You know, a lot of players might just panic flash over a wall or something like that when they see an invade happening, but with junglers, especially in the first 4 levels of the game, their entire kill pressure relies on just a key skill shot, you know, that Elise Cocoon, that Lee Sin Resonating Strike, the Jarvan EQs, the Vi Q, all that stuff. So instead of, you know, just panicking or flashing right away, if you save your flash until you see that key skill shot being used, you can really increase the rate of you actually surviving from the invade and make it so that, you know, even though the enemy jungler did get your flash, it's not going to be something that just totally loses the game for you. And our next trick is kind of the reverse of the previous one, and that is to save your gap closers for as long as possible when you're either invading or ganking, and really try to force your opponent to use their flash or to use their escape ability first before you ever use your gap closer. So getting an enemy to blow their flash without you really doing anything is, you know, it's definitely going to be a really big win, since it does make them an easy target for the next 5 minutes. Of course, you can come back, gank again, but holding onto your gap closer before they flash also gives you a really good opportunity to still secure the kill, even if they do happen to flash away. The same thing definitely applies to when you're flanking. You know, you never ever want to use your gap closer when you're flanking. It can be really tempting to use the gap closer to get on someone's flank a little bit faster, but it's always going to be better to wait for your opponent to use their escape, use their flash first, before you ever use your gap closer, because you can use that to really maximize your efficiency of the tools available to you when you're ganking an opponent. Once the enemy flashes to safety, then you can finally use your gap closer to catch up to them, and you can definitely secure the kill while also forcing their flash out too, and overall is just a much more efficient way to gank and to use your champion's kit effectively. And for our next trick of the day, it's about managing jungle monster aggro. Now, the thing to remember about jungle monsters is that they will attack the nearest champion regardless of whoever has hit it recently. You know, think about like when you attack dragon and then maybe you let someone else on your team tank it. All they have to do is just be closer than you in order to get the aggro from it. And this is something that you can abuse to a pretty powerful effect when fighting enemy players in your jungle, whether you're being invaded or whether you're invading your opponent in the early game, or maybe if you're just dueling someone later on. If you shift the fight towards a jungle camp and you use one basic attack to aggro that jungle camp, or maybe even just an area of effect ability that hits both the enemy as well as the jungle monsters, once the camp gets activated, you can change your positioning so that the enemy is closer to the jungle monsters than you are, and they'll start taking damage from the jungle camp instead of you. And jungle camps do a ton of damage, especially in the early game, the first 4 levels, a lot more than you would expect, and that one attack you spend getting the jungle monsters involved in the fight is usually a really good investment that pays off a lot stronger. This works best especially when you're playing champions that are maybe on the tankier side, since the fights are going to last a little bit longer, so that jungle camp's damage is just going to keep adding up to the point where your opponent gets a little bit overwhelmed. Either way though, you know, definitely want to be using those jungle camps, make the most out of them when you get invaded or when you're invading your opponents for sure, to make sure that you come out on top. Either way though, that's just about going to be everything for today. Kind of just some fun little tricks that I thought you could make use of in the jungle. Hopefully you guys like them. Maybe some of you guys do them already, that's totally cool too. Overall, these are definitely some things that you want to be making the most of in pretty much every single game, or at least in every scenario that they are relevant in. Anyway, looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.